and some of these schools go back to having tests. Rest assured, there are over 1,000 universities and colleges around the country that do not require the SAT or ACT as a part of the application process. So those are the schools that have gone test optional in the last couple of weeks. But why, you might ask, have they gone test optional? Well, here are why schools have gone test optional. Going test optional is not just a light switch that universities and colleges can flick, and they can say one day they're test optional, the next day they are not. So it requires a lot of different folks to ask about it. Folks have to talk to their boards of directors, they have to talk to the president, they have to talk to their entire enrollment team to make sure they're prepared for it. So it's easier said than done. But here are the reasons why so many schools have made that decision now. One, as you saw, lack of test dates. So nobody knows what the future will hold this summer and if those tests will be available for you all to take them. We also don't know, many students are not going to have the option to take that test at a time because of spacing issues and the capacity that they claim to have. So in general, there's just a lack of test dates. Second is the challenge in foreseeing challenges foreseen in digital testing. I don't know if anyone from the College Board is on this call, but there have been many issues in the past with the College Board with security, with cheating, with duplicate tests, duplicate questions, etc. So I am no expert in this realm at all, and I am very much confident in the College Board's ability to try the best they can to prevent, cheating or anything like that, but we can't say for sure. So colleges and universities aren't quite positive how that will work quite yet. The other big thing that's going to be an issue is that many students out there, particularly students listening to this webinar, are not going to have the opportunity to test more than once. So the ability to test more than once is important because statistically, as many of you all know, almost every single student who takes the test more than once can see their scores go up. So whether you're able to use Khan Academy or get additional test prep, or you have the benefit of test prep in your school, taking the test a number of times will allow you to do either a super score or have a higher score come in because of the opportunity you have to take it more than once. And so obviously the ability for students to take the test more than once is not possible in many scenarios right now. Another reason why some schools are going test optional is because there are still some questions with financially and with access to these tests. So if there are fewer spots available, who's going to have the ability to scoop up those spots first and foremost? Is it going to be students that are at public schools or private schools or more well-resourced schools that have the ability to take the test? So it's we're not quite clear yet if it's going to be equitable for who will have the opportunity to take the test. And so until we know for sure, that's one of the reasons why we decided to take this year to go test optional. Another reason is that we know that a lot of you all watching this webinar today are struggling with various issues. The world is a scary place right now. These are experiences that you are going to be telling your grandkids about. I know a lot of you are adjusting to a completely virtual space. Some of you might be like me and have a bit of a short attention span. So sitting through 12 Zoom webinars a day might not be your cup of tea. And so we know some students, their mental health might be at risk at this point in time. So we wanted to take one thing off your plate, one thing that we knew that we could at least control for this coming year and just have one less thing that you have anxiety about. We try as hard as we can at Tulane to be a compassionate place. We've been a school that has been well known for many years through our efforts through Hurricane Katrina, being a place that's adaptable and that kind of rolls with the punches and says, how can we create the best learning environment and experiences for our students and our applicants as possible? And so that's why the last point is there. We felt like it was the right thing to do in the wake of everything that's going on right now. We thought that for you, the students, that really at the end of the day, this is why we're doing it, is for your own well-being and for your own mental health in a college application process, which already has a lot of anxiety as a part of it. So that's why many schools have gone test optional. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit on the potential challenges. And I don't necessarily say challenges, but these are just conversations that universities and colleges across the country are having. And I'll be very candid with you on some of these points. These probably aren't things you're going to see on other webinars, but I want to make sure that that you know that there are, like I said, it's not as easy as just flipping a switch. And the first is, I know many of you all in this webinar, and I can see some questions are already coming in about merit-based aid and how this will impact merit-based aid. And so my dean of admission is a very smart guy, and he's really good about saying, how do we have an equitable process for all students to be eligible for merit-based aid? That being said, there might be some differences in how we package aid. We're still figuring that out. That'll be a part of the conversation in this Q&A. But do understand that we are taking all that into account, and understand that there will be merit-based aid available for students who don't submit scores, but we haven't figured out exactly how it will work yet. The other point on here that many colleges are talking about, many of you out there might not be aware of this, is that US News and World Report does make an impact if a school does go test optional. And we don't have control over that, but it is something that a lot of colleges are talking about. You know, if you do go test optional, does it impact your rankings? We're not concerned with that at Tulane, but it is something why a lot of colleges are thinking about this process and thinking about what implications will this have. So again, not something that's necessarily in your control, but at least something worth knowing as a prospective student, why this is an important part of the process and why US News does have the rankings as they are used widely, and it is a part of that process. The other thing for those of you who are watching this webinar for Louisiana students, TOPS, this is our scholarship opportunity program for Louisiana residents. It does have a component of SAT or ACT on it, and it remains to be seen if that will be impacted by this, but that is still a necessary part of that process. Same with guaranteed admission. So we do offer guaranteed admission for students from the state of Louisiana based on your specific GPA, the courses you've taken, and your SAT or ACT score. And in order to qualify for guaranteed admission, you still would have to submit SAT or ACT scores as a part of that process. Another thing on the back end side, which you don't have to worry about as a high school student, but it does take more time for colleges to read an applicant if they do not send in their scores. And we are absolutely willing to put in that work. We are excited to be able to do that. And one reason why we are excited about that is because, as you'll see in a couple slides, Tulane is a school that truly does practice holistic review, which means everything that you send into the admission committee will be reviewed, scores being one of them if you choose to send them in. So we are willing to take more time as needed if students don't send in their scores and look at other parts of their application. Of course, every student gets the benefit of having a holistic review, but it will take us a little bit more time. The other thing that you might want to consider is that schools that do go test optional sometimes do see an increase in the number of students who apply. Particularly this year, because it has been challenging to take the SAT or ACT, I wouldn't be surprised if schools that do go test optional do see a slight uptick in the number of students that apply. So I don't want that to worry you or to make you nervous at all, but I do think it is worth noting that yes, it's great that schools are going test optional, but one ramification of that is that those schools might see a slightly larger number of students that have applied. And the last question I mentioned on the previous slide is that every school is taking things differently. Some schools are doing this as a pilot program. We at Tulane are only doing this for 1 year for the benefit of the class of 2025. That's next year's graduating students, the college class of 2025. And so we're planning on doing it for 1 year. So it's important for you as a high school student to really do your research and speak to schools, speak to counselors to know how long will this program last, and will this be something that's temporary? Again, I think it's important to look at the University of California system, who has, I believe, done a 3-year plan, but there's a chance that could change. And it's also something that their faculty are debating right now. So I put these challenges on here just, for you all to put your thinking caps on there and to kind of see all sides of this and kind of see why colleges have made these decisions. There are many, many factors that come into play with this, and I don't necessarily say that these are challenges, but just things that we are all thinking about from the university side. So my colleague Leela and I are going to tag team this slide, and it kind of dovetails on what we mentioned on the previous slide. And that's that we're very proud at Tulane that there is no specific number or GPA or SAT score that will get you into or keep you out of Tulane. And the reason being, we are truly proud of how holistic we are at Tulane. And so my colleague Leela is going to go through the things that we look at when you apply to Tulane.
Hey y'all, so I didn't introduce myself at the beginning, but my name is Leela Lavens. I'm the Director of Strategic Recruitment at Tulane. I've worked here for 13 years, and I'm an alum like Jeff. But I think that this is a really great opportunity to really hammer in the concept of holistic review. What that means when you apply to a college, that we really are looking at every aspect of the application that you're presenting to us. At Tulane, there are certain students that succeed. There are certain attributes we want to hear about that you've done in high school, certain things that you've been engaged with that we know will allow you to succeed both academically and socially once you get to New Orleans. And so that means that we're going to look beyond just the GPA and the scores. It would be easier for everyone involved if that's all we looked at, to be quite honest. It would be easier for y'all, it'd be easier for us. We would know where we stood from the get-go. But really, that's not what makes our campus thrive. That's not what makes a community, and that's not what makes someone successful at Tulane. So we always have had a holistic approach to reading applications, meaning we're going to look beyond the academics. I will reiterate that we do want to admit students that we know will academically succeed at Tulane, that they will bring something to the table, they will be engaged with their classes, but we also want to admit students that we know will thrive outside of the classroom. The majority of our students do travel a good distance away to go to school at Tulane, and in an incoming class of maybe 1,700 students, we could have over 1,200 high schools represented, which means that the majority of students are the only student coming from their high school. So how do we know that these students will get to campus and will be part of the larger Tulane community? It's through this holistic review that we take, the approach that we take. So the other things that we look at are your extracurriculars, your leadership, what things you've been involved in, if you've been consistently involved with different activities, what your recommendations say about you, who the recommendations are from, what your optional statement says about you. In a few weeks, we will be hosting another Zoom webinar where we talk about, what your personal statement says about you, also what your optional statement says about you. But in a few weeks, we will be hosting another Zoom webinar where we discuss, kind of tricks and tips to writing a personal statement. There's a lot that we can get from an applicant through a personal statement. A lot of, characteristics, a lot of personality can come through. That's really your opportunity to kind of tell us about yourself, tell us what makes you unique, and really bring your application to life for us. So if you're looking at Test Optional and how it plays into a holistic review, there's a lot of different touch points that we already consider if we are looking at tests. So the strength of your curriculum, how you performed, how you perform compared to other students in the same curriculum in your high school, but also those extracurricular points. And if you're worried that we can't pick up on the fact that you are a strong student without those test scores, really highlight the other academic aspects of your application. So again, your transcript, make sure that we're paying attention to what courses you've taken and how well you've done. If you've taken any AP or IB tests so far, how you've performed in those. Also, think about your strength of writing, what you can tell us through a personal statement. That can kind of translate to somewhat of academic success. If you really kind of put time into it, avoid typos, avoid mistakes, but also show us that you're a strong writer, a critical thinker. There's other ways to highlight yourself through an application that really comes across through the holistic review that goes beyond the basic test scores. So at Tulane, like I said, we never go ahead, sorry.
I just want to add one thing with that, Leela, because I think it's really important to hammer that one home. We talk a lot at Tulane about finding the balance. I think one of the reasons why our students are so successful here at Tulane is that they do a really good job of finding the balance here. Whether that be a balance in academics, we're the type of school that allows you to, once you're admitted into any school or major you want. So we don't require any separate applications for any of our schools or programs. So you can balance a double major, balance two separate majors that are not related, balancing the social experiences here in New Orleans. And so what we're really looking for is students that have found that balance. And as it pertains to your academics, what we're looking for is, have you taken challenging courses that allow you to maintain a strong GPA? And so a lot of students are going to find they're on very different ends of those spectrums. Some students can load up on all the hardest AP or IB or honors courses that your high school offers and do really, really well, get a perfect GPA. Some students are more like me, and you can take some challenging courses and still do well. And some students, even some watching this webinar, are going to be in the other side of that spectrum. Wherever you fall on that academic spectrum, there will be a university out there for you. There will be a university that values the balance that you have found. Now, granted, the students that are loading up on all the hardest classes and doing well, those are going to be the ones that are going to be more likely to be admitted to some of these super selective schools. but not everyone can do that. And like I said, for us at Tulane, we want you to find that balance. We want you to do just as much as you can and still maintain that strong GPA. We strongly believe, and Leela mentioned it, your 4-year progress in high school, the grades that you've made, the classes you've taken, tells a much better academic story of your academic potential than a single test that you're going to take.
And also, I always like giving an example of the student that is a 4.0, 1600 or 36. So perfect student and has done nothing outside the classroom. Those are great kids. Those are wonderful kids. Those are not the type of students that will really thrive at Tulane. Years ago, it's probably 7 or 8 years ago, I remember working with a mother and her son, and he was admitted, and they came down and they were admitted to one of our top programs. And the mom came to me. They came, first time in New Orleans. They were here for the weekend, came on campus that Sunday for a program. And the mom came to me and said, look, I really need you to talk to my student. I'm so disappointed. Last night, we're staying downtown. He's never seen the French Quarter, and I really wanted to go out and get dinner. And all he wanted to do was study AP Bio. She was like, I just don't think, he's not absorbing it. He doesn't get it. And he ended up deciding between Tulane and another school that I'm not going to mention. But she called me and she's like, please try to convince him to come to Tulane. And I pointed that out to her. That's great. That's great that he was doing that. But we really need those students that are studying the AP Bio, but also put the books down and go, yeah, I want to go try gumbo for the first time. I want to try new experiences. I'm going to be engaged. Those students are great. I don't want to discourage anyone, but the holistic review really does come into play because we need students that are going to come to campus and succeed. We don't do you any favors by misleading you on what we offer at Tulane or by getting students here that might not make the most of their 4 years here. So really that holistic review plays out years into your college career.
And I'll just give one last plug too. Since you all have taken the time out of your busy schedules to come tune into this webinar, I think it's important that you know that the word optional right there, if you're looking at your screen right now, kind of like put your thumb over the word optional and just block it out because it's not optional. One of the most important parts of your application to Tulane is what you write about in your Why Tulane statement. And I know it's a lot harder to get a good sense of what we're all about here in New Orleans if you haven't been able to visit, but the hope is that we'll be open up for visitors later on in the summer and that we will be all in your hometowns all around the world this fall sharing the good narrative all about Tulane. But we really want you to do your research right now. Reach out to our current students. They're dying to talk about Tulane because they miss this place so much. There's a lot you can do right now to really bolster up that Why Tulane statement. You heard it here first. It is truly one of the most important parts of the application to Tulane.
Yep. All right. Anything else that we need to cover with regards to holistic review?
The last thing I'll just say with the engagement piece, I mean, obviously, one interesting thing about, the experience we're all going through right now is that the playing field is kind of leveled. So regardless of how much money is in your bank account or your opportunities or privileges that you have, nobody has the ability to visit campus or nobody has the ability to do anything right now. So everything is done in a virtual space. So Leela and her team and the rest of us here at Tulane have put a lot of work into some of these virtual events. And if some of them seem interesting to you, I mean, I see many of you all that are here today also have tuned into our previous webinars. I know a lot of you all went to our Year of the Dean exercise. Our exercise is all about tips to the application process. Go to these virtual events. Candidly, I'll tell you, we might look to see when we're reading your application, what type of engagement did you have with us during coronavirus? Did you take some time to attend one of our events? So thank you all for being here today. It means a lot to us.
All right, let's move on. And sorry, guys, I have a dog that's been asleep this whole time. And now that we're really going to talk, he's going to get going. Yes, it told me there might be a cat outside or something. Okay, the finals. So should I submit my score? Do you want to wrap up with this and then you, Brad, and I can do question and answer?
Yeah, so I think this is, I'm seeing a lot of the Q&A come in, and these are all really great questions. We'll get to a lot of these. I think that the question about should you submit your score, one, the most important thing, don't be afraid to ask. I mean, you can literally email us and say, hey, I only took the test once. I was super stressed out. I got a 29 or I got a 1410. Do you think I should submit it? And we'll do the best we can to give you an honest and candid answer about it. You can easily go to our website and see what our middle 50% is on the SAT and ACT. And I think a general rule of thumb is if maybe you're in the top 50% of our scores, it might be worthwhile to send in. But the point being, don't be afraid to ask. So if you are concerned about your score, if you don't think it's a good representation of who you are academically, then don't send it in. If you really feel like you'd much rather us focus on your grades and your extracurriculars and not your score, then you can make that decision.
Jeff, can I interrupt really quick?
Yeah.
I will put it in the same category there that we get every year of, okay, I'm thinking of adding this AP class, but I might make a B in it and might bring it down. That's not our call. How you change your schedule or tweak your schedule or what type of courses you take, that's really something you need to decide. So with Jeff saying you should ask, and I agree, you should ask. You should reach out to us and have the conversation. Don't take it as gospel. It's something that you need to decide as a whole. And again, think of the score as another touch point with this holistic review as just another academic touch point. You're welcome to have the conversation. We'll talk about it whenever. But don't make all decisions based on what your Tulane rep said. Kind of think of it overall as a whole.
And I completely agree. I also know a lot of you all on this webinar have tuned into some of our previous sessions about tips for the application process. And one tip I always give, and I promise if you haven't attended that session, I'll get with you and I'll hold this session again later on in May. But one tip I always give is less is more. A lot of times, a lot of students feel like they need to send in every single, recommendation letter that they have, or some additional, additional resume that's 4 or 5 pages long. Some of the best applicants we read are able to get the point across in a fairly truncated way. So, think about the big picture, how you want your application to look, but don't feel like you have to send in a lot of things if you choose to not send in your scores. Now, with that being said, as you all know, Tulane is does try to be a very generous school with merit-based scholarships. Every single student who is admitted to Tulane is automatically considered for our scholarships, which range from $2,000 to about $30,000 a year. So these are our scholarships that don't require a separate application. If you have decided to not send in your test scores, you will still be considered for those merit scholarships. There's no question about it. Every single student who is admitted will still be considered for those major merit scholarships. But I will be honest with you, at that point, you have a lot of very, very competitive students, all who are coming in with really strong letters of recommendation. They've got really good grades. They've got a lot of stuff to send in. And so at some point, we might have to look at some students who have really strong scores to give some of those larger merit scholarships to, only because we're at that point, we're comparing the best of the best. And so it's tough for us if we don't have something that can kind of differentiate them. I unfortunately have to say it, but in some cases, when you have 2 rock stars, if someone does have some really strong scores, that might be the one that tips the scales in that student's favor. I'm particularly talking about some of our full tuition scholarships. So we offer the Dean's Honor Scholarship and the Paul Tulane Award, as well as a global scholarship for our international students, as well as the Stamp Scholarship, etc. So we do have a full docket of full tuition scholarships. When we are reviewing those applicants, they are phenomenal. I mean, I'm comparing 3,000 students who all have a 4.0 GPA, and Leela serves as the chair of the Dean's Honor Scholarship Committee. Some of these projects that she sees are incredible. So if we have students that have submitted scores and they're super strong, yes, I will candidly say that that might give them a slight advantage for some of these full tuition scholarships. We're doing everything we can to make this equitable and make everyone have an opportunity to get these things. But again, at some point, because Tulane only has an 11% admit rate to begin with, for some of those larger merit scholarships, a score might be helpful. I'm not saying it's required, but it might be helpful. Will it be harder to get in if I do not submit? We don't know yet, and I hope not, but we don't know yet. We have absolutely no idea what percentage of students will or will not submit scores. We've spoken to some of our peers at institutions like GW and University of Chicago to see what percentage of their students don't submit scores. It's my hope that it will be fairly similar for students that don't submit scores. The question is, how many of our students are not going to submit scores? We don't know the answer to that yet. What I can tell you, for better or for worse, is that Tulane's admit rate this year is hovering right around 12 or 11%. So we are a tough school to get into regardless of if you're sending your scores or not. If you apply to Tulane, you're very pleased with your application, you're proud of everything you put in there, you love it, and you don't submit your scores, great. You're going to give every possible consideration that you can, and the same consideration to a student that submitted their scores. Sometimes scores do help, but what I can assure you is in this case, if you don't submit them, it's never going to hurt you in that process. Anything to add, Leela?
No, no. And we got Brad on. So yeah, let's go. I'll stop sharing and we can go to question and answer. We've had a number submitted.
And I really thank you all so much for these questions. Our goal here was to have just kind of 30 minutes of this session and 30 minutes for Q&A. It looks like we hit that right at 30 minutes, which is great. And I'm so pleased to see that there's such a huge turnout for this event, that you all have great questions. Even just the fact that you're here learning about this, it really does mean a lot to us. So thank you so much.
So how do you want to handle this? Go ahead, Brad.
Well, I was just going to start. I'll read off a question and answer it, and then I think we can pick them from there.
And both Leela and I promise that if you stick around to the end of the Q&A, we'll both show you our dogs.
His is cuter than mine solely because of age.
I'm very excited to show you Vincent. He's just 12 weeks old. He's adorable.
So the first question that we'll pick up, I'm happy to jump in on this one, is if I sent Tulane my test score already before you were test optional, can I still submit a test optional application? I think it's a really good question. It sort of gets at the heart of the process of going test optional. And basically there will be a question on both a common application or institutional application where you'll just say, please consider me test optional or not. And based on your answer, we will either suppress your scores or we will use them in the process. So if you do happen to submit your scores to Tulane, you can continue to do that and not worry about it until they actually apply. So if you say that I do want to be test optional, we won't be looking at your scores in the process. It would not be a consideration as we make our decision.
And some of you out there might also not be aware, or if you are, we are a totally self-reported school, which means that if you choose to submit your scores, you do it on your own. So you don't have to request the College Board send us. You don't have to pay us $8 or $15 or whatever it is. So you can totally self-report everything. One question came here: does submitting a test score give an applicant an advantage over others? And I think that's a good question. So the reality is when you apply to Tulane, you are competing for your spot in the class. You are not competing against anyone else. So it's not like I'm going to take all my applicants on a desk and say, which of these do I want to admit? You are competing for your spot in the class. So we're going to look at your application based on everything you put there. We're never going to compare two applicants to each other in the admission process. Like I said, if you send in scores, you're happy with them, it might bolster your chances of putting forth a great application, but you're never going to be compared to someone else. We will never compare a student who did submit scores to someone who did not.
Okay, so we got a question through the chat, and I will ask y'all if you do have questions, submit them through the Q&A function next to the chat. But I did see a good question through the chat that my school has opted for a credit, no credit semester, so my grades won't be considered in my GPA. How will that affect my application? It won't affect it. We look at these normally. There are a number of programs out there where students may study abroad or do a non-traditional semester and don't get grades. A lot of schools are doing this right now with COVID-19. Please understand that a lot of you are in the same boat. It will not negatively impact you. I do understand it might be somewhat of a setback mentally because you're like, oh, I was revved up and I was going to do well this semester. I can tell you, I was a senior when Katrina hit, and all of the classes we took from other schools counted the same way as pass-fail for Tulane. So I had a semester where I took the classes, but my grades didn't count, and I was bummed because, you know, I was a senior in college and I figured it out and I did really well. But it's not going to impact you negatively. So please don't worry about that.
I like this question from Samantha. She says, I'm very happy with my SAT score and was counting on it to get into some of my reach schools. Will it still hold the same weight in my application? And I think yes. So if you are choosing to submit these scores, if you're pleased with your score and you really want it to be considered, again, by all means, send it in. Like I said, you know, as you compete for your spot in the class, put in the things in the application that you're the most proud of. Frequently, as we do these tips and tricks sessions, as Leela mentioned, we talk a lot about how can you make your application pop for all the right reasons. And so anything that you're very proud of, whether that be scores or not, put them in. So if you are happy with your scores, by all means, please do send them in.
One of the others is, how optional are the standardized tests? Are they optional in the same way Jeff said that the why Tulane is optional? And I would say no. It's at the heart of what we're talking about here, is that we're giving students the chance to put together the best profile that they can, advancing their credentials in the best possible way to be competitive. Our idea is to advantage everyone in the process as much as we can. And so, no, it's not the same as the test optional or as the optional essay. If you really want to put together your application, you feel like this is an opportunity for you to showcase your other talents and skills, please consider the test optional. It's very appropriate.
Good question.
We got a question in the chat about the College Board giving optional online AP exams this year. Will you be looking more closely at a student's AP scores this year if they did not submit SAT? No. Again, those are just another touch point. So for example, while we don't require SAT2s, there are a number of overlap schools that do ask for those. And so sometimes students submit SAT2s. They're not something we require. They're not something that we're looking for. But if they've done well on those exams, I encourage them to submit those scores to us. Same with AP or IB. We don't require those scores to be submitted. They can be used to translate to credit hours at Tulane, but aren't necessary. And if students have done well, tell us about it. Again, it's another touch point and another thing for us to consider when looking at the multiple things you submit with your application.
Michelle says, since more students will be applying, will the acceptance rate for the university decrease and become more competitive? I don't know yet, but I think maybe. Tulane's already a very competitive place. We receive around 45,000 applications a year. We have a finite number of spots available in the freshman class, a finite number of beds available in our freshman residence hall. So if more students apply, we can't admit more students. So, just by the law of numbers, yes, it might be more competitive, but I think that one remains to be seen. And then I'll just answer this quick one. Someone asked, why is the SAT canceled, not the ACT? I do not know. That's a good question. And it's a question you'll probably want to pose to the ACT folks directly.
Here's a good question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just the question, is the personal statement is the same as college essay? Yes, it is. Sorry, we use those interchangeably. So with anything, you're going to look at the personal statement. Then a lot of schools, and my guess is a lot more schools now that they're test optional, will ask for the optional statements as well. So that's when we said for optional statements, remove the word optional. Go ahead, Brad.
This next one is, does Tulane track demonstrated interest? And the short answer to that question is that we know when students are interested in us. We are aware when they visit high schools. When we visit high schools, if they come and see us, if they've come to campus, how they're responding to us. And it's definitely something, as we're putting together a class in much the same way that Leila was talking about earlier, what it means to be holistic and finding students who are going to be able to take advantage of what makes Tulane distinctive. It's something that we're looking at. And so, yeah, we're looking at people when they're engaging with us. In an age when people are able to apply to 25, 35 plus schools by filling out an application, particularly a school that doesn't charge an application fee, we want to know who are the students who want to be a part of our school.
And I will say one thing that I sometimes stop short of using the word demonstrated interest, because demonstrated interest to me feels like a robotic experience where you feel like you have to jump through a lot of hoops to demonstrate your interest. What we are looking for is your authentic engagement with us. And so guess what you're doing right now? You're engaging with us. Like, the fact that you took the time to do this is important to us, that you're learning more about our process and you're listening to what we've got to say. If we're able to get to your high schools in this fall, we will be there. We visit almost 1,500 high schools a year. We visit almost 40 community-based organizations. And so our point is to really share the good word about why we love this place so much. And if that's interesting to you, then come on to those events. If you're writing your why Tulane and you're feeling like you're just, grasping for straws and you just can't authentically write it, then you should cross us off your list. So do what comes naturally to you. Don't feel like you have to check off a bunch of boxes and jump through a bunch of hoops. It's the authentic engagement that we're looking for.
That's a great point. And it's not the number of emails you send us or the number of events you attend.
It's for you.
I personally, because my team oversees hosting events, I'd love for you to come to all the virtual events, but we're not tracking that. It's just, have they been engaged? Have they checked out what we have to offer? Does it seem like they know what they're talking about and why they're interested in Tulane? We've gotten a number of questions about the AP test this year. Our Dean of Newcomb Tulane College, so we have a kind of umbrella college that hosts all 5 schools on campus. They recently announced that we will be accepting AP scores and IB scores the same as we have in past years. So I know that the test may be shorter. Somebody asked, what if I have Wi-Fi issues and the scores aren't as great? If the scores aren't great, don't tell us about it. No big deal. But if you're looking about if that will translate to college credit for us, it will. We will treat those the same as we have in past years. Again, sorry to mention Katrina twice, but we're a school that has been through things, and we want to work with you all as much as possible and make sure that this process is as easy as can be, because we know that everyone is going through a point in their life that they will never forget right now.
Here's a good question. Do you foresee the possibility of application deadlines being pushed out because they canceled SAT and ACT? Absolutely not. I will tell you, absolutely right now, we have no plans to change our application deadline, and you should move forward as if these deadlines and dates will not change. If we have to change our application deadlines, it throws everything out of whack. Our admit numbers, our financial aid modeling, Right now, our application deadline for early action is November 15th. We have no plans on changing those deadlines. So please make sure you stay tuned to those deadlines because they will not change.
Here's a good question on what are you going to do with my high school grades this semester? Basically, the heart of the question is we're going past fail. Final exams have been canceled. What are you going to do to evaluate my transcript, particularly in light of going test optional? I'll certainly, whatever Jeff and Leela want to contribute as well. But the bottom line is that we're all going through a very unique period. We're well aware of what's going on, and that absolutely will be taken into account when we go through the transcript. We expect there to be a little bit of a gray when it comes to this semester. Different schools are handling it differently. It's our job to know as admissions counselors and territory managers how schools are handling it and being able to respond responsibly and appropriately to support these measures.
We got a question submitted about, I was planning to have a part-time job this summer and it's no longer happening because of COVID-19. So should I still include this in my application? So rule of thumb is, I've had the question multiple times about, okay, I started baseball season and then it was canceled. If you participated in it at all, mention it in your application. We all know what's going on. We're not going to wonder, what's the gap here in this participation. I understand a lot of y'all have plans that were scheduled for the summer, whether it was going to camp, being a counselor, working, doing different things that are probably no longer either going to be the same or going to exist at all. What I would say is look at this time as an opportunity. There's still ways to get engaged. There's still things that you can do to really be a member of your community right now. Look to see if you can volunteer. Look to try to learn to sew masks. This is all going to shift and change over time. So I understand your more traditional summer jobs are no longer going to exist this summer. Colleges are not going to hold that against you. We all know what we're going through. But I would encourage you, if you do have the opportunity to spend your time doing something, try to take advantage of that. Try to look at this as an opportunity and look at it as a way to do something differently.
My
also,
friend,
go ahead.
look at these cool masks my friend's been making. This one's my tropical mask.
Also, I would recommend with personal statements, so your application, your essay, avoid writing about COVID-19. Because every junior in America is going through this right now.
In the world.
And we understand it is horrible. It's a horrible situation. And I cannot even imagine being in your shoes right now. But my guess is this will make your generation unique. Hopefully, most of you do not have situations within this that are that different or hard that are unique. There's so much more about you as a person that we want to hear about that will set you apart. So try your best to avoid writing about COVID-19 in your experience, because there's so much more that's happened in your first 16 or 17 years that we want to hear about.
And I'll add on to that. Now's a great time to keep a journal. I know, especially you guys out there, you don't want to journal, but I will tell you, now's a great time to write your thoughts and feelings and the ups and downs. Maybe this whole experience has changed your academic passions or your worldview. I mean, now's a good time to just kind of freeform it, and one of those might turn into a really strong essay, not necessarily about coronavirus, but I can't echo that. I mean, I can't imagine in September and October admission officers are going to want to read 70,000 essays about this.
It also might have changed your academic passions. I mean, I've looked at all of this repeatedly and been like, man, maybe I should have gone with public health. But in 2002, when I started at Tulane, there were maybe 6 or 7 kids in my class that went public health. But I mean, this is going to shift a lot of stuff for a lot of people, but the overall experience isn't necessarily what we need to know about. We want to know about you.
I'll answer some of these very quickly. If your score is at the 50th percentile above, would you recommend submitting? I would say yes. I did really well in the ACT multiple choice, but on the essay, we don't look at the essay. So if you don't want to send or take the essay, don't worry about that at all. And lastly, if we're relying on this semester for your GPA, and then now it's pass fail, what will that appear as? We're gonna try to make the assumption that if you're on an upward trend, we're gonna hope that you would have continued that trend into this semester. So if you're really starting to do well in your first semester of your junior year, we're just going to assume that trend's continuing and then kind of see if we can get maybe some first quarter senior year grades for you before you apply early action. So bottom line, we're going to give you every possible benefit of the doubt that we possibly can.
Another question along the grades. Will grades be judged on a harder scale if you're using test optional versus not? The answer to that is no. We recalculate your GPA. So everyone who applies, we have a team who goes through and takes out your courses and recalculates those GPAs on a 4.0 scale. And then the admissions council for the territory looks at what the courses are offered and uses what the scale is for that particular institution to talk about what rigor and types of opportunities you've taken advantage of it. We are going to be looking at GPA in a stronger context in terms of your overall academic qualifications for the school. That's absolutely true. SENS, the test scores, that's really the central focal point for us to be able to determine your academic capability to come to a school like Tulane. But beyond that, it's about understanding who you are and what you're taking advantage of contextually, and that won't change.
And on that note too, there was a question with regards to your average GPA. There is no average GPA. A student at one school, an A at one school is not the same as an A in another. Or a school with 35 students, like why would they rank if you're in the second decile, if you're number 7? It really is what Brad said, in context to the curriculum offered at your school, how you've performed in that, and your school profile will outline what is offered and how the overall class and probably classes before you have done relative to your high school.
I'll take a couple quick questions. There's one says, I'm taking the ACT in June. I've already registered and I've already asked my score to be sent to Tulane. Here's my suggestion for you all. If you do end up sitting for any of the SAT or ACT, I would say hold off on having any of your scores sent. So don't ask that they send your scores in. 2 reasons why. 1, you can wait and see what your scores are before you decide to send those to us. And 2, we are self-reported, which means you don't have to have the official scores sent. So literally the day that you find out from the ACT or SAT what your scores are, you can make the decision if you want to submit them, and then you'll go in your Greenway portal and submit them there. So I would recommend not having either the SAT or ACT automatically send your scores. Wait till you get them and then self-report them for free. 2 quick questions about where can you get in touch with your admission rep, and the other question is about how can you find out the scholarship we offer. All of that's on our website. So we make ourselves very, very available on the website. Just click the button for Meet Us at the top. If I'm interested in the honors program, should I submit a test score? That's a good question. Leela, what do you think?
Most likely, yes. Again, this kind of stays in line with students that are applying for the full tuition scholarships. Yeah, I mean, these are the cream of the crop, and it's not to say that all of those students at Tulane aren't incredible, because they are, but the honors program are academically, they're very sound. So I would encourage it, yes.
I would say there will be students admitted into the honors program who don't submit their scores, more likely. But again, at this point, it's just so competitive that we are going to at some point have to look at a similar metric. Mm-hmm. We're getting many questions about, do we super score the ACT? And as of now, we do not super score the ACT, but we do super score the SAT.
Miles asked that he recently reached out to Keith, who is our director of Midwest Recruitment, regarding application questions. Is he a good contact? He absolutely is. All of you do have a specific counselor in the office that works with your territory. And again, to really reiterate what Brad said with regards to knowing your territory and understanding your high school profiles, that's where that comes into play. That's the importance of that, because for the majority of you, they will be the first reader on your application. So yeah, stay in touch with your personal admission counselor.
If my school does not provide letter grades or have GPAs, we have written evaluations. Does that affect the test optional policy for me? From Sivan, I'm assuming you either go to St. Anne's School in Brooklyn or that one school in Austin, which name I can't remember, or maybe you go to another school, because there's only a handful of those left. We will still practice the same holistic review. You will not be required to send in the test if you don't have letter grades. We'll probably have to have a little bit of a lengthy conversation with some folks at your school just to get their personal take on it. And that's something that we do anyway as a part of the process for students that don't have letter grades, but no, you still don't have to submit scores.
We had a question about the earliest that you can apply. So my very lengthy title translates to comms, communications, and you will hear from us many times this summer, but the earliest you can apply is August 1st. I promise you will get emails letting you know you should get things in the mail. But yeah, get online, comment up, and our application will both launch August 1st. We also got an question about if we still super score the SAT, and yes, we will still be super scoring the SAT.
I'm seeing a fair amount of questions that are specific to Tulane, which are great questions about pre-med, questions about specific majors, diversity. These are awesome questions. We have plenty of other Q&As and webinars that we have our current students at. And so we're going to probably save some of those questions for the many, many other webinars that we have. So if you're asking some of those questions, again, great questions, just maybe repost those when we have some of our future events coming up. If I plan on taking the October SAT, if there is one, will I still be able to apply early decision? Probably, yes. I would say you probably would be able to, because as soon as you have those scores, we start reviewing for early decision. The deadline's November 1st. We'll probably have those scores kind of first or second week of November, but just make sure they get to us as soon as possible. We can't guarantee you that we will use them, but we'll do everything we can to wait to make a decision if you really want to make sure those scores are considered.
And that's where your relationship with your admission counselor comes into. So you should reach out to them, and then also the general Tulane, the general admission email address, just letting us know, hey, I might have some scores coming in later. Please just, putting it out there so we can flag your application just in case we can wait to review it.
And as a follow-up to the question that you just asked, responded to, does applying in August improve my chance of being accepted? And the answer is no. I think that the advantage to applying early is that you're able to get everything in and making sure that you're complete ahead of time. And it's a good way to make sure that you're contacting your admission counselor to work through the process. But generally speaking, overall, just make sure you're done and complete before the deadline. And we have a status portal. You're able to log in and see in real time what information has been received by the school.
One of our students asked, how do you consider family and personal situations and the semester, how does the impact on your grades, especially if there's been an upward trajectory? So there's a part of the application called the additional information section. That's a great time for you to let us know anything you want to tell us. We are real human beings with real hearts, and we are a compassionate group of people. If your grades have been impacted by a family situation, let us know about them. Again, I go back to what Leela said, everyone's going through some tough stuff right now with coronavirus. But if there really is something that's having a major impact on your grades, letting us know in the additional information section is a good chance to do that. We can't change your C's to A's, but we can at least have some more context as to why your transcript looks the way it does. So make sure you pick one place in the application to include that. I always say the additional information is a great chance for you to share anything else you want to make sure we're aware of.
We got a question about interviews being a part of the application process. We do offer interviews for students that apply early decision, and we try to offer interviews for students applying early action. A lot of that depends on when you complete, just because there is a bottleneck closer to the deadlines. And interviews really serve as another touch point. Traditionally, I've rarely seen an interview where the alum does not recommend the student. Interviews are more of a benefit for you. And again, just another organic way for you to say, yeah, I am interested in Tulane. I'd love to meet an alum and hear what they have to say. Yeah. We got a question too about gap years. Jeff, we haven't seen an increase in gap years, have we?
We have not. So for current seniors, which probably isn't too many people on this webinar, we usually see about 40 students take a gap year every year, which is great. Our students have gone all around the world. One of my favorite students spent his gap year cooking with a chef in Paris, which I found very cool. But students have done some amazing things. We have a lot of students that will spend a gap year in Israel. We're still fully supportive of the gap year. We probably won't want to go too much over that number of 40. What we are suggesting for students that if they want to go on the gap year, by all means do it, but don't do the gap year because you're waiting to see if the school is going to be online in the fall. If you're going to take the gap year, go forward with it and make that plan, but you can't kind of go back and forth based on what's going to happen. Our plan is—
that said, because the question was, if more students take a gap year, will then it be more competitive for this upcoming admission cycle? So with that said, we're kind of regulating how many students will take the gap year, so that really shouldn't impact y'all's admission cycle.
Does taking a full IB program make a difference in your application? Yes and no. Simply by being in the IB program, it's not going to, say this student will be admitted because they took IB. But again, we're admission professionals, and so we know all about theory of knowledge, and we know all about your extended essay. We know all about AP US history. We know all about the courses your high school offers. So again, it's not just about taking the classes, it's about, did you find the balance within those classes, and were you able to maintain the strong academic GPA? I will say candidly though, we love the IB program. We know how hard y'all are working. Sorry, my dog is chewing a ball back there. We know how hard are working. We know about the strengths of the program and how well you will be prepared for a college experience.
We also got a question about, I was able to visit campus before all of this happened. Will that benefit me? Again, it's organic engagement and interest. We're still offering tours twice a week, so Tuesdays and Thursdays. So while that won't be a benefit, in the same way it won't detriment other students that were trying to visit and weren't able to. It's across the board. So you still have options to virtually visit, and we will note that you were able to visit. Does that make sense, Brian, Jeff? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Here's a technical question. Will you accept the ACT or SAT scores after an application is submitted due to test availability? And I think the answer to that question is simply depends on whether or not you're applying test option. If you've elected to include test scores as a part of your application, it's definitely something that we're going to be looking for as a part of the review process. And if you choose to not have your test scores as a part of your application, it's not going to hold things up.
So we have 2 minutes left. Do y'all want to wrap up with a piece of advice each, and then you can show off your puppy?
Can't wait to show y'all.
I'll go first. I think that, as we're moving forward, as we've talked several times during the presentation, we all have admission counselors that are assigned to different territories. These are your best first resource, and when you have any questions as a part of the process, they'll be visiting your high schools in the fall, Lord willing, if you're able to go out. If you come to visit campus, they're the people who will greet you when you're there. If you have questions over email, they're the ones who will respond, and they're the ones who will shepherd you through the process to help you make sure you're submitting your best application.
I guess I'm going to just double down on what I've said before. Please understand that you're all in this together. Please don't think that you are being penalized and that colleges are going to be tougher on you. If anything, I would look at all of this as an opportunity. A lot of these incredible schools are going test optional. They want to work with you through this process. So, don't let this stress you out more than it already is, because I know it's stressing everyone out. It's a hard life that we're living right now, but please don't think that this will negatively impact your college application process, your college search. Really know that colleges are working with you, and we're going to do whatever we can to make this process easier for you.
So I will say one question I want you to try to get out of your vocabulary is the question of, which do colleges prefer? Should I do this or that? Should I take this summer program or that, or this class or that class? And because what we want when this is all over, and when we can finally leave our homes, and when we can finally, sorry, my dog is back here. When we can finally hug each other again and live our lives, the last thing I want you to do is go out there and start doing things because you think it's what colleges want to see. When this is over, I want you to go live your life and start to fulfill your passions again, and see your friends again, and just enjoy all the things we couldn't enjoy. What we don't want you to do come July or August or whenever this is over, I don't want you to go out and feel like you have to make up for lost time, or do all these extracurricular activities, or stress out about the ACT. What Brad and Leila and I want is for you to have less anxiety about all this college application process right now, because this is tough. And when it's over, we want you to be happy and be free and live your life and not worry about what colleges are thinking about what you're doing.
And parents, make note of that message as well. If I were a senior in high school or junior right now, my mom would not have listened to that message. But parents, try to heed it as best as possible. Jeff is coming with the wonderful and magnificent Vincent.
Okay, so this is Vincent. I love him so much. So Vincent, so my fiance and I were supposed to get married in a week and a half, and obviously that's not happening. So instead of getting married, we decided it was time for a little puppy. So we got Vincent. I hope he brings you a little bit of joy, because I know everyone's going through a rough time right now. He's brought us a lot of joy. He's the most wonderful guy in the whole wide world. And so you got to kind of see the kindness and the happiness and the good things that are to come.
And there's my dog.
It would be really helpful for us if in the chat feature, if you all could just give us any feedback Leela and her team are working really hard to provide really great content. I know there's hundreds of questions we didn't get to, but if you head over to the chat, leave your questions there and also leave us any feedback. It will give us great information about what future events that we can do for you all. As Leela mentioned, oh, there's Maccabee. We are here for you all. Stay strong. From all of us here in New Orleans, you know, we went through some tough stuff 15 years ago, and people said, when will your restaurants ever reopen? When will the city ever be back? When will you ever recover? Some people thought we never would, and we sure as hell did. So eventually the whole world will find a way to get back on its feet. New Orleans is here with you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight, and have
really
a good
quick, Jeff, we got the question about if this is recorded. It was. I started a little late, so it might be a little choppy, but we will be providing this online. Just FYI. But that was a great sign off, and I'm sorry. Yes, we will be back.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye.